Welcome to Based on a Book, the podcast for middle school outcasts and intergalactic travelers alike. I'm Crystal, and I was an awkward preteen.
I'm Keri, and I still don't know what a tesseract is.
And I'm Lindsey, and I'm currently an awkward adult.
This episode, we are covering the winner of the 1963 Newbery Medal, A Wrinkle in Time, by Madeleine L'Engle, and the movies from 2018 and a bit of the 2003 movie. So let's set the scene, shall we? A summary of the book directly from Wikipedia is one night, 13-year-old Meg Murray meets an eccentric new neighbor, Mrs. Whatsit, who refers to something called a tesseract. Meg later finds out it is a scientific concept her father was working on before his mysterious disappearance. The following day, Meg, her child genius brother Charles Wallace, and fellow schoolmate Kelvin visit Mrs. Watsit's home, where the equally strange Mrs. Who and the voice of the unseen, disembodied Mrs. Witch promise to help Meg find and rescue her father. So, before we get into what we really thought, do you guys have any one sentence, no spoilers reviews and your ratings, please? Let's start with Keri.
So my official rating, so I'm just kind of going off the book rating. I would probably say 3 happy mediums out of 5.
Ooh.
So I read the physical. I also read the book before I watched the movies, before watching both movies. I'd never seen the movies, never read the book before, even though it is a classic Disney movie and also book. Like, I feel like everybody's read this book. I feel like I'm the last person to have read it. But I definitely feel like the first half was really, really good, very appealing to me. But the second half got lost in the sauce with an underwhelming climax.
Okay. Lindsey, what did you think?
I have to agree with Keri, but I also gave it 3 celestial beings.
Ooh.
I gave it a Mrs. Witch, a Mrs. Who, and a Mrs. Whatsit.
Oh, I like that.
I also read the book before I watched both movies, and I read it digitally. And yeah, there were some parts that were they kind of struck home. It was kind of tough. The theme with Meg and everything. Won't get into details, but yeah, I like the beginning of it a lot more than the ending.
No,
Yeah,
I get that.
I definitely agree.
Well, I give it a solid 4.5 synchronized bouncing balls.
Oh, okay.
This book was the first time I ever read it, I was 10. It was my introduction to, I think, science fiction just in general, right? It was my first introduction to new ways of thinking outside of just 3 dimensions, thinking outside of what I've been told and shown my whole life. There's even a part in the book where one of the characters or one of the creatures that they encounter, they don't have sight, and trying to get Meg, the main character, to explain sight to her. And even that was something that, like, it had never occurred to me that it would be nearly impossible to be able to explain experiences to people or beings that had never had anything similar. So this book really kind of got me thinking outside the box when I was younger. This time around, I read the physical copy before I watched the movies. I had never watched either of those movies, so that was new for me. But this story is like classic early introduction to science fiction for a lot of kids. So it's definitely one of my favorites. The themes that are presented, the ideas and the concepts that are presented, really, to me, as somebody who ended up falling in love with science fiction, really just, to me, that's like, this is above and beyond. This is as close to a 5 as you can get. And honestly, I agree with both with what you said about how the first half is really great. It kind of sets the stage, it kind of builds, and then the second half just kind of, I don't know, I feel like it kind of rushes through a lot.
Yeah,
It leaves
definitely.
it definitely leaves something to be desired, but this is the first in a series of 5 books, and if you take it as that beginning to that stage, that setting up the stage of the next 5 books, it makes more sense. As a standalone, it's still good and it's still worth reading, but the next books really do kind of expand on that rushed aspect of that last half of the book. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was reading it thinking of what it would be like reading it as a kid
Mhm.
and if I would be as interested in it as I was now because I wasn't when I was younger, I wasn't really reading a lot of fantasy as like I'm assuming you would be reading this maybe it says middle grade. It's like sectioned out as middle grade or on the younger side of young adult, right? But it's very
Right.
complex.
It
It's
is.
Really
actually
is.
extremely complex. I was
And
very surprised by that.
very much so, and I don't know if your copy had it in there, but I remember the original copy that I read a bajillion years ago did, and mine does now. It has, like, a picture description of what a tesseract is, or looking
Yes.
at the idea of, like, they even mention Euclidean geometry in here. When I was a
Mhm.
kid, I didn't know what that meant. Now I do, and there are other types of geometry, like, but it didn't change the fact when I was younger that somebody mentions Euclidean geometry, and I'm like, "Okay, geometry, shapes, got it," and I just moved on, and you didn't really need to know what that meant
Yeah.
in order to know that we were outside of that.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
think
yeah, there's lots of deep, deep concepts there, but I think it's presented in a way that you don't have to fully understand them in order to get the gist of the book, of the
yeah.
story.
Yeah. I think it's fun reading. It's almost like when you're watching a Disney movie as an adult, like you catch on to things and concepts that you don't catch on to as a kid. And I think that's
Absolutely.
really fun reading a middle grade book as an adult because you're
Mhm.
catching on to like all these things that you would not comprehend reading as a child.
Absolutely.
And I just like seeing those things, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And it also feels very like nostalgic reading those things. And I
Oh,
really
yeah.
love that. Especially like I don't know, like just something about the second half of it just like wasn't grasping me. Like I don't
Yeah.
know what it was. Like something about it just wasn't it was very easy. Like you said, it was very rushed at the end of how the conflict was settled.
Right.
Like I
Yeah, no,
get
I
it.
agree.
I understand why it's rushed, but the beginning was just so good that I was like, "Ugh, I kinda
Absolutely.
don't care about
Lindsay, did
this."
you read this previously?
No, I never did. I
Okay.
know it was something that came up in school, but I actually never read it.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's, uh, I think I remember when I was a kid and I read it, it was, I think it was more exciting because the book talks to the child characters like they're adults, right? Like the other adults in the, the Mrs. Who and Mrs. Which and Mrs. What's It, even Meg and Charles Wallace's parents talk to them, the children, like they're equals, like they're
Mhm.
just as smart as the grown-ups are. And I think that that was really something that spoke to me too, because I was, a kid that was considered a gifted, talented kid when I was younger, and being treated like I was still a kid. You know what I mean? It's really frustrating when you grasp something and yet you're still sitting there in the classroom waiting for everybody else to catch up. Like, so I kind of really identified with Meg. Meg is the main character. She is incredibly smart, but very bored at school. She's upset because her dad is gone. They don't know where he is. A lot of the town is gossiping,
Mhm.
about, he probably left, with that many kids at home. And, like, so there's a lot of gossip, there's a lot of talk. She's really frustrated. She gets teased. She's kind of an outcast. She's an outsider. And I definitely kind of identified a little bit with that. My parents are divorced. I was a little bit smarter. I'm not gonna say I was smarter than the rest of my class because we had some really, really smart kids in our class, like, that I still talk to this day, that they're still my friends, but they read these books too, and we all kind of identified that, like, when we're smart and we get something and these grown-ups are still talking to us like, like we don't know what, I don't know, geometry is, like, we don't know basic shapes. It's like, "Come on, guys, like, we can figure that part out," you know? And
Yeah.
this book really does kind of deliver this information as if it expects you to be smart enough to figure it out, to get the context clues, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I felt like I could something I could relate with Meg was being, like, an older sibling and being very protective of your younger sibling.
Mhm.
That was something that made me, like, super emotional and connect with Meg as a character, like, especially, like, seeing it on screen and also reading it in the book, like, I was very connected to her as an older sister. I could
Mhm.
see that as having someone or being someone with a younger sister. I was like, "Oh, like, I literally love this, and I love this sibling connection." Like, there's something about stories and, like, the whole concept of, like, being so protective of your siblings and, like, during this whole thing of, like, these kids that are trying to save the world, and
Right.
during this process, like, you're trying to save your sibling from something. I was like, that's what really, like, got me all emotional in my feels about the whole story. I love that part.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts.
I think what caught me as an adult is the Charles Wallace character.
Mhm.
For the majority of our listeners probably don't know, my son is on the spectrum. He's 5 years old now, and it took a long time to get him to speak, and he's still not doing great. The character Charles Wallace is 5 years old in the book, and he's incredibly intelligent, like, off the charts smart, but he doesn't speak to anybody outside of the family, and the community thinks he's stupid because he doesn't talk. And, when I read this as a kid, it was just like, "Oh, Charles Wallace is a weird kid." But now reading this as a mom, like, that protective nature, that older sister, that motherly nature that's just like, Charles Wallace is not a weird kid. He's a really smart kid who knows he's not gonna fit in with his peers instantly because they don't know half the vocabulary he does, so even if he did talk to them, they'd still think he was weird, you know? And I really, I don't know, like, looking back now, like, back when this was written in 1962, it autism wasn't something that a lot of people spoke about. It was just you were a normal kid or you were a weird kid. That's really all there was. And or you were sent to an institution, that was it. And that's even something that comes up in the book is that, Charles Wallace should be in an institution. One of the teachers mentions it, I think, or one of the other grown-ups. Um, and looking at that with fresh eyes from 2024, I'm going, "Oh, wow, this kid is probably a spectrum kid," you know? And I don't think that that was something that the author intended, but that's definitely how I'm taking it now, you know what I mean? So, I
Mhm.
feel like that's there's such a huge difference in reading it with a kid's eyes versus now rereading it with adult eyes. I'm seeing so much more. And then, like, it's like you said, Meg protects her siblings, but she's also trying to save her father, which is
Yeah.
so typical of children of divorced parents, like, trying to, like, make sure to protect their father or their mother, not necessarily from the other parent, but just, like, their feelings, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't
Mhm.
want my dad to think I don't love him because I'm not fighting to stay over here this weekend or whatever. And so, seeing Meg thrown into that role is just like, "Ouch, kid," you know?
Yeah, definitely. I also think that I always find it so interesting how we have in these, like, young adult, middle grade books with the kids saving the world, like, it always
Mhm.
kinda makes me laugh a little bit, like,
Mhm.
none of the adults are, like, doing anything, like, even Mrs. Watson, Mrs. Who, Mrs. Which, like, they're just like, you are now responsible to, like, go save your father.
Right. Like, it's on
And
you
I mean,
guys. Good luck.
full spoilers ahead. I guess we should put our spoiler warning here if we're getting into all the nitty gritty of it.
Did we have any other non-spoiler thoughts to give that might convince someone to stop now and go read this or watch the movies?
I mean, I cried the entire movie. That should convince you right there.
It made me
Lindsay?
quote my favorite doctor, so
Ooh.
Oh,
it's a big
Ooh.
ball of wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
It really is. If you
it
like
really
time
is.
travel, if you like time travel, if you like, well, tesseracts, if you like teleports or wormholes or anything like that,
If
like,
you like
well, and there is a little
if you
bit
like blue skin,
blues. Oh my gosh. Okay. Quit. No, if you're into like any of the time travel, any of the wormholes or space travel or anything, this is an awesome book, but there is definitely some religious undertones. Keri, get it together.
I'm still stuck on blue skidooing. I'm sorry. That's all I could think of. Like, this is kind of like blue
It
skidooing,
really
isn't it?
is like blue skidoo, and they jump into the picture. That's kind of what
Yes.
happens.
I
No,
feel like that's tessering, is it not?
no, not at all, actually, but close. Um,
I would assume it's the exact same thing.
I mean, I guess technically it could be.
Well,
I don't
okay,
know.
so blue skidoo, don't you have to see whatever you're gonna blue skidoo into? Or can you
I
just blue skidoo
listen.
somewhere that you can't
I,
see?
I am a huge nerd when it comes to like wormholes, travel, fourth and fifth dimensions. I don't know the rules of blue skidooing. I'm sorry, I can't help you here, Keri. This
Well,
like,
we
and I
need to
watch
figure
blue
that out.
skidoos all the time.
I do know.
Listeners, please contact us if you know the rules of blue skidoo.
Blue Skidoo,
Based on a
you
book
can too.
podcast at gmail.com. Like, oh Lord, y'all. Before we do the spoilers though, let's like there are religious undertones in this book. They are very non-secular. They're very agnostic. It's super, they mention Jesus, but they don't say anything about him being the son of God. They talk about how he is a fighter for good. But they also bring up Gandhi and Buddha and a whole bunch of other people. So although they do mention God as like a higher power and doing things for the greater good, there is some religious undertone here, but it is not a shove religion down your throat book the way some other kids' books are framed. So I feel like that's something to be mentioned, but it's not really something to be worried about. If you're someone who is an atheist who doesn't necessarily want your kids reading something that has those undertones, I totally get it. But I feel like this is not like the movie completely leaves out, both movies leave out all the religion, all of it.
Mhm.
So the movies are
Yeah.
definitely safe in that regard. But I feel like this probably would be as well. But of course, as a parent, make your own decisions for what's best for your kid on that one. Having said that, we're going ahead with full spoilers at this point. So if we have convinced you to read this book or to watch these movies, pause this episode, go do that. We'll wait for you. Come on back. Did you do it? We're back. Okay. So
Unpause.
Welcome back.
unpause. Full spoilers. We're gonna go through exactly what happens in this story from start to finish. I guess the first synopsis pretty much says it. The Murray family is 4 kids, right? Meg's the oldest, Charles Wallace is the youngest, and there's 2 twin boys in the middle. The 2 twin boys are really not super important to this story, but they are to the rest of the series. So the fact that the movie left them out in the most recent movie, the 2018 movie, left them out really bothers me because that tells me right there they're not going to do the rest of the series. So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
but both of the parent, the mom and the dad, are both scientists, and they have been working on a special project. The dad ends up working for the government and doing some special super top secret science experiments and stuff. And then he sends letters all the time. And then one day the letters just stop coming. He has disappeared. And no matter what the mom says, trying to get a hold of him through the government channels, they say he's working on a project. He's working on a project. you can't contact him. And that's all they'll tell her. So he's been gone, according to the book, for 2 years. This is like formative time for Meg, right? Because she is in that preteen, like junior high ish. I don't think they ever mention what grade she's in, but she is in that like 10 to 12 years old window. And
Mhm.
she is devastated because her father used to always sit and talk with her like an equal,
Yeah. He
but
was everything.
he was everything. And now he's gone. And she's supposed to just go on with life like everything is normal. And she's struggling with that. And of course, all of her teachers are telling her things like, what's wrong with you? You need to get yourself together. You used to be so smart. Why can't you, figure this out? Why can't you be nice? You can't be depressed forever. All
Mhm.
the typical stuff that people tell people when they're assholes. Like, I like the whole time I'm like, be nice to this girl. She lost
Yeah.
her dad,
Even the principal is, like, telling her, "Your dad's not coming back, so you need to, like, get it together." And I'm like,
right?
"Excuse me?"
And then asks about her mom, like, "So what's your mom up to, kid?"
Yeah,
Like, ew. Like
The audacity.
like,
I
again,
know.
as a kid, I didn't notice that. As an adult, I'm like, "Is he trying to get in good with the mom?"
Yeah,
Like,
that was so bizarre. Like, what are you
totally,
doing?
totally creepy. But yeah, so it's a dark the movie or the book starts, it's a dark and stormy night. Of course, in the movie, we get the thunderstorm as they kind of fade into her bedroom, so I like that they kept that.
Mhm,
That's really sets the scene of the whole story, right? This, like, unknown tumultuous time, this dark and stormy night.
mhm.
Meg can't sleep, she goes downstairs, Charles Wallace is sitting there at the table waiting for her. Now, he's only 5. He's like this very, very young kid, but he's speaking in these full sentences. He's made her a sandwich. He's got the milk on the stove ready to make hot cocoa. Like, he's a fully capable kid. 5 years old, he's using the stove,
Yeah, he's
like
like,
it's
"You
not
want anything to eat? You got" it's, like, the middle of the night, he's like, "You want a sandwich? I'll make you something. You want something to drink?" He's,
right.
like, ready to go. And this is, like, their routine as well.
Exactly. She's like, "What are why are you up?" And he was like, "Well, I knew you'd be up." And she's like,
Mhm.
"How did you know?" And he's like, "I always know,"
Yeah, which I
and
think is interesting that so in the book, he talks like kinda indicates that he in the very beginning, like, saying that he always knows, like, he always has, like, this telepathic type feeling. I mean,
right,
they get into it more in the book, but in the beginning, he kinda indicates that.
right.
That is not in the movie.
No, like, he mentions at one point that, like well, in the crappy movie, in the 2003 movie, like, I'm just gonna be
The
honest, I
crappy
hated that
movie.
one.
Not the two I liked it! Okay, the 2003 movie, I can't explain it. Okay, so the 2003 movie
The
was
2003 movie had
giving
Wookiees.
okay, I know, I know,
What
I
was
know, I know.
with that?
But listen, listen, listen. So, it was giving like, I can't explain it, like, it felt like something where you would see as, like, a Disney Channel original movie.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, it felt, like, nostalgic in that way.
I feel like the 2003 movie definitely stuck closer to the book.
Yeah,
The screenplay was definitely closer to the book than the 2018 movie, but it was so poorly done
yeah.
that, like and not just made for TV movie, but, like, made for TV on a really bad channel. It just like, the story was there, the script was there, the production and direction was not there,
It made
at
me
all.
angry.
Yeah, it really like, I was just getting angrier and angrier through the whole thing because I was like, "This could have been good."
Yeah. I
I
mean, the
think
Disney movie just blew it out of the freaking park,
it really did.
honestly.
I think what in the Disney movie, in the 2018 movie, they really kind of skim over a lot of why Charles Wallace is a special kid,
Yeah.
and
I
in the
think
book
that's what really bothered me about it, honestly.
yeah, because in the book, he is super smart. He's somewhat telepathic. His mom and his dad said that he's something different. Like he's not like the rest of us. His IQ's off the charts. He's a special kind of smart. We're going to have to make accommodations for him, and we're not even sure what they are yet because he's so different from us as humans. Like, not as he's different from us as in he's adopted, but like he's different from us and that's the other thing. In the Disney movie, he was adopted.
He was adopted, and yeah.
Yeah, and in the book, he was not.
No. And I didn't like that either. I will say there's a lot about the Disney movie I didn't love, but I actually really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah.
I can tell you what I
was there.
loved. Chris Pine.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
Not
like,
gonna lie, I was
wait,
excited
what?
about that. Because, well, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but Chris Pine is also
In Star Trek?
in Star Trek. Oh,
I did
just
know
a little
that.
bit. He's Captain Kirk. I'm just
He
saying,
is.
like,
I did know that.
when I saw that face, my heart started to flutter. I was like, "Oh, Captain, my Captain!" Like,
Oof.
Well, whenever I started the 2018 movie, I didn't look up anyone that was in it. I
me
went in,
either.
like, completely blind. I wanted to be surprised because, well, I knew Oprah was in it because I've seen, like, a lot of, trailers and things like that. But I wanted to be surprised because I heard that there were a lot of, like, famous celebrities that are very commonly known in the movie, and I just was like, "Oh my god. Oh my god." I was like, "Zach Galifianakis, what the." I
I
was,
did
like,
the same
shocked.
thing.
I
I
was
did the same
shocked.
thing. Yeah.
For me, it was Reese Witherspoon. I was like, "What? What?"
Yes.
And then
It
I was
was
like,
like,
"As Mrs. What's-it?"
I
Like,
know.
I knew she was in it. I knew Oprah was in it, and I knew Reese Witherspoon was in it, and that's all I knew.
I just
Yeah.
like Reese Witherspoon. Let me start by saying she's gorgeous. Period. And
Mhm.
she's an amazing actress and an amazing human being. Period. However, I feel like she was the worst cast for this particular role because she's so beautiful, because she's so glamorous. And Mrs. What's-it is a rag lady in the book. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, she's
Yeah.
a
They
rag
kinda
lady.
they
She's
kinda
a
changed.
hobo. Like,
Yeah, they changed how, like, they changed Mrs. What's-it's, like, personality, I feel,
absolutely.
to fit whatever they wanted Reese Witherspoon to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, they meet the misses. They meet the misses. Charles Wallace and Meg meet all three of them. And then Calvin just comes wandering along and he's all like, "I just had a feeling I was supposed to be here."
Okay, a hot take. I don't understand the point of Calvin.
He's the romantic interest. Duh.
But, like,
You
what
didn't
did
get
he
that?
really no, I got it, trust me. I totally got it. I got the romantic interest, but honestly, the whole time I was like, "What is this kid doing here? Like,
Okay.
what's his point? What's his
So
purpose?"
this is where the early movie kind of did it right, right? Like at the end
I
when
liked
she's talking
him
about
and
love,
yeah.
that is Calvin's reason for being there, is the
Mhm,
love aspect, right?
mhm.
Because the key, and we find this out in the next books, not necessarily in this book, although it doesn't hurt to tell anybody. I'm not ruining anything of the next books to tell you that love is the key to the Tesseract, to being able to transport, right?
Mhm.
And to being able to Tesser, which is different from transporting. Sorry to all my sci-fi nerds out there. I know that. Well, it's like,
And different from blue skidooing.
it is it is definitely different. So, and like, let's explain that for a minute because there is a diagram in the book that really makes it easy to understand for most people, just not Keri. Um, if you think of space-time as a fabric, right? As like just a flat sheet of fabric, and you pinch the corners of the fabric and then bring your fingers together, right? It makes a little loop in the fabric, but those 2 points are now close to each other. And that's what they're doing with space and with time, right? So if you wanted to go just across town, but you didn't want to have to get out the car keys and pay for the gas or whatever, you could just fold up all the streets until, you know, downtown and uptown meet, and then just take the one step over to uptown, and then everything unfolds and nobody notices.
That's the wrinkle.
That's the
Yeah,
wrinkle.
that's the wrinkle. But what's the Tesseract?
There is no actual object of a tesseract. Tesseract is an act of doing something. It's like a dance. Like there is no such thing as a physical dance. It's what you do, right? It's the action. It's the verb. To
Okay.
tesser is the verb.
Because Mrs. Watson comes in and she's like, whenever she first sees them, when she shows up at the house during the storm, and Charles Wallace lets her in, and everyone's like, "What the heck is this lady doing here?" And she tells the
Mhm.
mom that she's like, "The Tesseract is real,"
Yeah.
and she's like, "What the heck?" It's like this thing that they've been studying forever and like trying to tell other people that it's real, like and doing tests and all those things. And I'm trying to picture it as like an object.
With like a button or a switch. Like,
No,
yeah.
because they
Like,
said it's like a 5D object, basically, right?
well, it's using the fifth dimension
Yeah,
in order to create the fold.
yeah.
Right. To create that wrinkle.
Mhm.
Which, without getting too science nerdy, we have to go into hyperbolic geometry in order to, yeah. Like,
Wrap it up, wrap it up.
so, okay, actually,
Wow.
have you ever crocheted anything and like, it gets those like ripples when you crochet it?
Not
Yes.
Okay, so
well.
that's kind of what's happening. Like, that's literally what's happening when you crochet. Those like ripples are, yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
I
Like,
can't
It's
crochet
us.
either.
I'm just gonna
It's
nerd out on
us.
you.
It's us. It's us reading Wrinkle in Time, but getting into what a tesseract is and
Yeah,
just deep
yeah,
diving, and
it's fine.
me yelling "Blue Skidoo, Blue Skidoo."
Booskadoo, we can't do.
Oh Lord, y'all. This is okay, so I'm like super ADHD and I definitely fixated. I had my hyperfixation for a long time was time travel and space travel. And so
Yeah,
like,
I know
yeah.
you were having a time reading this book. That's why I was like, I know
Yeah,
Crystal is
kind of just a
loving
little bit.
this.
Just a little
I
bit,
know she is.
maybe.
But yeah, so Mrs. Watson, she's like, the Tesseract is a thing or it's real, and then that's
And
when
then she
everything escalates.
kidnaps Mrs. Murray's children.
That's
And this is where,
exactly what happened.
as a child, this was so cool, like being whisked away to another land, very similar to Oz or a million other books. As an adult, I'm going, you can't just run off with someone else's kids. Like,
Yeah. Like, what are you
but
doing?
we do find out in the book that they also wrinkled time, which doesn't make it okay. But they also wrinkled time so that the kids would come back before they actually left and
Yeah.
Mrs. Murray wouldn't notice.
Mm-hmm.
But let me, again, as an adult, that's still not okay. That's still kidnapping. Like, just because you get them back before anyone notices doesn't make it okay.
Yep.
But yeah, so she runs off with Meg, Charles Wallace, and Calvin, the kid who lives across town or whatever. And they go, like, they test her with these kids without warning them. That's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing. They kidnap these kids and then do things without their consent. Not okay, folks. Like,
Yeah. Without even, like, in the book, they don't even tell them what they're, like, about to do.
yeah, they're just like,
And
let's
in the
go.
movie, in the 2018 movie, they're, like, kind of try to explain what
Right. And
tessering
then they're like,
is.
hold hands.
Yeah. Like,
Like,
"Follow me." Like, all that's missing is, like, a white van and candy. Like, what are we doing? Like, stop! Stranger danger! Like, don't do that.
right. I will say, I love that, like, Charles Wallace is like, I met these strangers and they're so cool. And Meg's like, dude, don't talk to strangers. And he's like, no,
Yeah.
they're good. Trust me. My judgment.
Yeah.
I know things you don't know. So you have
Yeah.
to trust me. And she's like,
Yeah.
okay. Like,
Wasn't it Mrs. Who brought in Calvin?
yeah. Cause she was
Yeah.
like, I guess, put a thought in his head or whatever. Cause he
Yeah.
was just like,
Well,
I just have a feeling I need to be here.
yeah.
So I'm here.
Yeah. That's true. And then later doesn't she give him I thought for some reason Calvin had, like, some type of power or something.
Communication.
Communication. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. That's what it
Yep.
was. That's what it
She
was.
gives him the ability to like break through to Charles Wallace.
Mhm.
So they're kidnapped. They go to the, another planet, Uriel, which is like this super fancy, everything is happy, everything is good. I think this was supposed to be somewhat indicative of like a nirvana, a heaven,
Mhm.
someplace where there is no bad, where there's only love, everything is beautiful, everything is balanced.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, Meg is like, where the F are we? You can't just kidnap us.
Mhm.
That's not okay. Which, my girl Meg, I love you. Thank you. Charles Wallace is still
Voice of
like,
reason.
right? Charles Wallace is still over here like, it's good. I promise. We're fine. And they're all like, you need to rest here where it's safe because we're fixing to do some crazy shit and go someplace it's not safe. And Meg is like, wait, are we going to save my dad or not? Because if we
Yeah.
are, then
Like,
let's
where's my dad?
go. You know? So they like, Mrs. What's It transforms?
I want to unpack this.
Please
I
do.
need to unpack this.
There's a lot
Okay.
to unpack.
I
Yes.
don't have
Because-
answers for this one. So
I need to unpack this. I've been waiting for this moment. Okay. And it's about the movies. Because
Okay.
I really need to talk about this.
Please do.
Okay. So in the book, Mrs. Watson transforms into a centaur, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Something
Yeah,
like
like a
that. Yeah.
centaur. And they like get on the back of Mrs. Watson, flying around to like basically tour the place, right? Tour the
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah.
And like look around, like look at all these like crazy things that are going on. Like it's so pretty here, you know?
Right.
So in the movie, or okay, let's go to the 2003 movie actually.
Okay.
The horror movie.
The
It's
horror
really creepy. Really creepy.
that is the centaur that they created. Jump scare everyone.
Yeah.
Honestly, don't even watch the movie. Just look up an image of that centaur, and that's all you need to know.
It was
That's all you
definitely
need to know. It's the
creepy.
scariest thing I've ever seen in my
It's-
entire life. The graphics of that centaur
But
was
okay, again,
insanity.
2003
Yeah.
CGI.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
keep that in mind.
Of course,
But
course.
also
But still,
The
The
design.
worst. The worst
The
of
design.
2003.
Who
and
designed that?
the
Yeah.
design. Okay, and then in the
Nightmare
Disney
fuel.
movie, 2018 Disney movie, here comes Reese Witherspoon, the flying cabbage carpet.
That was a Leafeon, I'm pretty sure.
I was gonna say that's definitely a Pokemon.
that I'm pretty sure that's Leafeon that Eevee transforms into with all the like leaves and like the I don't know what that
Immediately,
was.
I was like, I can show you the world.
I went a different direction. We're going on a trip on our favorite celestial witch, flying through the sky, a wrinkle in time.
Oh my god.
Yes, it's perfect.
I actually went a completely different direction. Butterfly in the sky. I can fly twice as high. Oh my gosh, it was so bad. And again, no shade to Reese Witherspoon.
But
Because-
what was that?
But what was that?
Lettuce leaf, Mrs. What's It?
I'm telling you.
I was like,
A cabbage patch. This is what's it. Like
I was honestly like, I was like, okay, what's Disney about to do with the centaur, man?
And
Like,
then,
I've
like-
been waiting for the centaur.
and then like the wings were like some sort of like manta ray in the sky. Like I
Manta ray in
can't
the
even
sky.
like and then she like burritoed around the kids to like dive down.
But they were also flying above her.
Right? They were like floating. Now, okay, I do like that they introduced that little tiny bit of science because that was legit. And it's not in the book, but that's the only science in the whole freaking movie. And that's what kind of like
I'm afraid of heights. I would not have done that.
I was like, here comes Reese Witherspoon, the flying piece of lettuce. Okay.
again, no shade, Reese. Like if you
Like,
wanted
what
to
is going on?
Thanks.
if you'd like to tell us what the creative process was for that, based on a book podcast at gmail.com. Like no, it really like the differences in the worlds and how they were presented right there was just like ew. Like that's when I was like, okay, both these movies suck now. Which they don't. They really
I mean, I think it was really pretty. Like the
was
world that they
pretty.
created was really pretty in the movie, in 2018 movie. I just like, I was like, what is this giant piece of lettuce? Like, it's so weird.
So that's another thing. And so like Uriel was the break before they send the kids to Camazotz or wherever the heck. Yeah, Camazotz.
Don't they go to another?
Well, but then they decide they're going to go to the happy medium first.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So the idea of stopping at Uriel was to give them a break to kind of like do the huddle and talk about what the plan is, and to show them what they're up against, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like in the book and in the 2003 movie, they definitely impart to these kids that the thing that they're up against, the darkness, is like it gives them like they really like set the feeling, the mood of like this thing being like imposing and terrifying and scary. And I feel like the 2018 movie was like, look, there's the bad guy, go. They really didn't
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they didn't really kind of tell us what this was. They were like, Camazotz is a bad place. But in the book, Camazotz is not a bad place. Camazotz has been taken over by a bad thing, you
Yeah.
know? And they're talking about how this thing is expanding and taking over lots of places. And they don't really, I mean, they talk about how like it's got a far reach, but they're not talking about like it's literally taking over. It's a threat to all goodness, even this beautiful place like Uriel. So then they leave Uriel to go see the happy medium, who is a medium, a psychic of some kind,
I love him.
which I think is hilarious that we have this book that is like science based with a little bit of faith thrown in, but also a psychic.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, if we're talking about tessering and fifth dimension, then what the medium does is just kind of see and look into other places, not necessarily into the future, but like in the present is able to see other places. And so I feel like it's not really that far fetched when we're talking about fifth dimension and tessering and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
um, and they go see the happy medium, and the happy medium is supposed to show them what this darkness, this thing really is. And they also get to see their mom, and Kelvin gets to see his mom, who turns out to be kind of a bad mom.
Or in the
Mhm.
2018 version, his dad.
Yeah, mean, a mean, aggressive father.
But also, we get the line, "You sound like my mother. Is your mother a baritone?" I loved that.
There were a few handful of lines in this movie that were just like, oh, like it was pretty good. I feel like of the two movies, my son happened to notice that I was watching a movie that had kids in it, for the 2003 movie, and he was really interested for about 5 minutes and then left. The 2018 movie, he was like, this is pretty cool, and he sat with me and was like engrossed for a solid 45 minutes, which is a lot for him. So I'm just saying that alone, it's I think kids are probably not going to like the 2003 movie. Just putting that out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, definitely.
But
That
there were definitely some good lines in the
yeah.
2018 movie, and so grown-ups are going to like it too.
Yeah. That 2018 movie, I don't know what it was, but every little moment I felt like it was just a story about Meg
It
and
really was,
Meg's
and I feel like they
journey.
changed Meg just enough
Mhm.
that it wasn't the same journey.
Yeah.
Meg in the books has a temper.
Yeah.
She gets angry really easily. She is somewhat depressed. She's a little aggressive. Like she is super protective of her brother. Like
Yeah.
in the movie, Meg is all of those things, but kind of like less so. Like they kind of dumb
Yeah.
it down.
I feel like I don't know if it was dumb it down. I feel I felt like I could relate to Meg because I felt it was almost shown as like
Yeah,
internalized emotion, like internalized anger, not so much shown outward aggression, like inward aggression at yourself. And like she could not open up to anybody and she couldn't even test
yeah,
her correctly because
right,
she was just so angry inside and could not open up to anybody and could not
right.
release anything, which I can relate to a lot of that kind of stuff. So I could see that a lot in her, and then at the end, like, she finally could release her emotions and could test her correctly. So I
Right.
think that's what that
Yeah.
was, instead of outward anger and, like,
Right.
how it is in the book.
I think in the book, what ultimately saves the day is Meg's weaknesses, right? It wasn't that she was stronger than anybody else. It was just that there was something that she could feel or think that the other people hadn't considered,
Yeah.
right? And in the movie, she saves the day because everybody else is too weak to do it.
Mhm.
And I didn't like that
Yeah.
because it somehow overshadows the fact that her weaknesses are what saved her to begin with, rather than everybody else sucks, so I have to do it. And that kind of like, I don't want to say it rubbed me wrong, but it was just kind of disappointing to see,
Yeah.
because as much as I love a strong woman, there's no denying that we all have those, like, I don't know, like feeling like you have to rescue everybody else because you're the only one who's even capable of doing it is
Mhm.
really crappy. Like, because then you feel like you don't have a choice anymore. Like, you don't have, like, nobody else is ever going to be able to do it. So now I have to.
Yeah.
Whereas with her, it was more like, let me try something different.
Yeah.
It wasn't a, I have to do this. It wasn't, you all suck and you all are incapable. And now I have to, you know, finish the job for you. It was, let me try something. You guys have tried everything. Let me try something,
I
you
actually
know?
have, like, a part marked in the book, and I think it's Mrs. Watson is, like, giving each of them, like, some type of power or something like that
Right.
before
Yeah.
Just
they
before they
go.
go into Camazotz.
Yeah, and she gives Calvin, like, his power of communication and gives Meg the power of her faults, and she's like, "My faults? I hate my faults. I don't
Yeah.
want my faults."
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, like, I'm gonna give you your faults. That's your power before you go in."
I loved that. I absolutely
Yeah, and
loved
that's,
that.
like, I have that tab, that's, like, one of my favorite parts in this book.
I marked that one too.
Yeah, it's so good.
So that's perfect because that's the next thing that happens. So they get to
Mm,
Camazotz after they've seen
mhm.
the happy medium. These kids are like, okay, we have to go save our dad. The Mrs. Who, What's It, and Witch are all like, bye, you're on your own.
Yeah,
And they're like, they're all like, why can't you come with us? Like, can you at least tell us what to do? And they're like, we don't even know what to do. You're literally on your own,
which
right?
is crazy.
Right? Like, we're just gonna drop you off in a different
Yeah,
planet where we don't know anything, you don't know anything. Good luck. Like,
yeah. And how old are
okay.
these kids?
Yeah, like, well,
The
Like,
Charles
youngest
Wallace is
5.
5, so, like,
"Go find your dad, bye."
right, good luck, um, and we're gonna give you all your faults. Have a great time.
We gave you communication and your faults. See
Right?
ya.
And we tell Charles Wallace, "Quit being so proud. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know everything, kid. Shut up." Like, so they're on this planet. In the book, it's very much like Twilight Zone, like creepy.
Mhm.
Everything's in sync. There's like a beat to the planet, right? All the kids are dribbling the basketball at the same rate. The kids are jumping, they're jumping rope at the same pace, at the same rhythm. And even Charles Wallace is saying that like this rhythm, like it's hurting my head. Like the beat
Mhm.
hurts my head. In the movies, I think they kind of tried to do that in the 2003 movie. It was iffy. In the 2018 movie, they made it some sort of computer simulation where it like changed the scenery when something, like, they tried to like convince the kids that like you're safe here, and then when the kids were like, no, this isn't real, it changed to something else.
Yeah.
And then like they were on a beach and they were like, it was,
There's, like, a forest thing, and something was, like, running after them,
yeah, it was
and then they were
very,
at the neighborhood or something.
yeah, it was very weird.
I kinda get it because it's about
Well, and it
they
was set in present time. It was not set in 1960 or
yeah.
1990 like the other one. It was set
It's about this
now.
thing in your mind
Right.
changing what you're seeing in your head outwardly,
Exactly.
and I get that, like, it's like changing the scenery, what you're seeing
But it
around
didn't
you.
seem quite as suspenseful creepy to me
Mhm.
as the original, like, you're walking down the street, these are actual humans all around you,
Mhm.
and they're, like, in this weird rhythm, in this weird, like, almost, like, forced to go to this beat with everything they do. They're all walking in time with each other. They're all bouncing the ball in time, like, it was
Except for
just
the one kid
except for the one
who
kid,
really wanted to play basketball.
right?
The kid
And
got
so, like
into it.
right, so, like,
Yep.
they're walking down the street, they're trying to figure out, like, where will our dad be, and they're noticing all this weird stuff happening, and they're not sure that they feel safe even talking to anyone because they don't know anything about what's going on, right? So they run into a few people. The people are like, "Where are your papers? Who are you? What are you doing here? Do you have your authorizations?" Stuff like that. And of course, Charles Wallace is getting frustrated and he's smarting off to these people. And Meg's like, "Shut up. You're going to get us caught. You're going to get us, whatever, arrested." Calvin's trying to smooth things over, Mr. Communicator over here. And they finally end up with one guy who's able to tell them that, like, or the paper boy that's able to tell them, like, you're going to want to go to Central Intelligence. And they're like, "Do what?" And so he kind of like points him in the right direction. He's like, but the paper boy is scared. He's like, "If I don't make my deliveries exactly on time, I'm going to have to, what did they call it? I can't remember what the word is. I'm going to have to, like, get reoriented or whatever the heck
Yeah.
they said."
Yeah.
And so they realize that, like, this kid's kind of scared, but even Charles Wallace is like, "I'm not reading anything off of any of these people, and I can usually tell what's going on with people."
Mhm.
So they go to Central Intelligence, and it's even creepier, right? Like, all these people standing in line with all their papers, like, nobody's really talking, everybody's moving in time with each other, but nobody's saying
Which
anything,
is, like, my worst nightmare, like, going in somewhere and, like, not knowing what's going on
right?
and no one's answering any questions,
Yeah, like,
and I
I don't
don't
even
know
go to
the
new restaurant
process.
yeah, I don't even go to new restaurants without, like, researching the menu and the process before I get
Like, the
there. Because,
ordering
like
process.
Yeah.
yeah,
How
yeah,
do you
no.
order?
How do you order? Like, what line am I supposed to go in? Where do I park before I even get
Yeah.
there? Like,
That's,
yeah.
like, my worst nightmare.
So here are these kids just walk into this building that's nightmare fuel for literally, like, 80% of the adult population of the United States at this point. You know what I mean? And they just walk
Yeah.
right in, and Charles Wallace just corners some guy, and he's
Yeah, he's
like,
like,
"Hey,
"What's
what's
going
going
on?"
on?" Like, so somehow they convince somebody to, like, "How do we get in there? How do we open the door?" And they get through, and I feel like this is where it gets a little choppy in the book, right?
Totally.
This
I was
is
about to say
where
that.
we start doing the whole, like, rooms upon rooms and seeing different instruments, and
The
I f
red-eye
the
person and
red-eye
then the
man.
it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's, like, this red-eyed man who is obviously, like, we find out that he's like a puppet, basically,
Of
of the
it.
it.
Quote,
Yeah.
"it."
I will say throughout the whole book, it does say it's capital IT, right? And even though I read this as a kid, I was like, IT. In my head, I could not stop reading IT instead of it.
That's what I did
I did
too.
too, yeah.
It because, like, we live in a world where there is an IT,
Yeah.
and when this book was written, that was not a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So, it was definitely one of those moments where it was like, maybe I should have used the audiobook. But it's very creepy. It's more Twilight Zone type stuff. The kids are trying to, like, Charles Wallace is under some sort of psychic attack from this right? And he's trying to fight it off, but then he's like, maybe if I just let it win, I can figure out what's going on here, and then I'm smart enough, strong enough, big enough brains to be able to get back out again. And Meg and Kelvin are like, "No, don't do that. The missus told us not to leave each other, not to split up. That would be you splitting up. Please don't." And he does it anyways.
Mhm.
And he ends up basically, like, taken over by this and he becomes a puppet. So,
Similar to the
the
man with,
red-eye
like, the red
man,
eyes.
red-eye man. And so Meg and Kelvin, they don't wanna leave him behind, so they're just following him, and Charles Wallace takes them to their dad, Mr.
Yeah.
Murray. And from there, it's like them trying to break Mr. Murray free, but they can't without, and then they try to break Charles Wallace free from the it, and they can't. And they get taken directly to the it, which is like some giant brain thing that's pulsing. And
Yeah.
it is trying to now like psychic attack Meg and Kelvin and Mr. Murray. And Kelvin convinces Mr. Murray that they're not going to be able to hold out. They have to leave. They have to Tesser. And it's going to mean leaving Charles Wallace behind. And Meg in the movie flips out and is like, no, you can't do that. And she breaks away from them mid Tesser and ends up staying with Charles Wallace.
Which
In the
I think
book, we have a whole like 6 chapters, or maybe like
Yeah.
2, but still, before that actually happens. So
Yeah.
this is what pisses me off about the 2018 movie, is that we didn't get to go to Ixchel. Ixchel? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah,
Probably.
I was really sad about the Ant Beast scene being removed from the Disney movie because I thought they could have done like a lot of like cool stuff with that. But you know what? I realized like the reason why the tessering happens like by Meg is different in the 2018 movie than it is in the book.
Yeah.
Like she tessers in the 2018 movie because she's just so angry and upset that they're doing something. Like in the 2018 Disney movie, the misses are actually about to tesser them out away whenever they meet the happy medium. They're about to tesser them out of there back to their home and not make them go fight the it
Right.
and go
And
find their
Meg
dad.
rips away from that
Yeah.
too.
And she does that again, but in the book, they're like, all right, we took you to this planet. Go find your dad. Bye. And
Right.
they don't do that in the movie. It's Meg fighting the Tesser so badly because she's trying to find her family, which I feel makes a little bit more sense.
It does, but it doesn't jive with the rest of the series. Because
Oh,
again, tessering is love, right?
yeah.
Like that's the frequency. So for her to fight it with hate and anger, it wouldn't
Or is
work.
it love because you love that person so much you're trying to get there?
No. Only because that's the whole thing of the book,
No.
is
You're
how
wrong.
she
You're
hasn't
wrong.
let. Right, you're wrong. But like that's why Ixchel is there though, right? Is because remember she's already touched so much by the darkness with her anger and her hatred towards the world and towards everyone else, that when they get to Ixchel, she's so affected by the Tesser at this point that she's paralyzed right when she gets there, right? Like she's so sick and she might not make it. And Aunt Beast helps to get the darkness out of her. And that's the only reason she
Yeah.
was able to test her at the end, is because that anger had left her. That anger and
Yeah.
that hate had left her. Which is, I think, what kind of kills me about leaving Ixchel out of the movie. First of all, in the 2003 movie, they made these creatures look like Wookiees. Madeleine L'Engle was still alive when the 2003 movie came out. They were asked about it, she said, "I had very low expectations and I was not disappointed." Like, that's how bad that movie was to the author of the book.
Yeah.
So
That was rough. That whole
that was
Ant
rough.
Beast thing. I love that whole Ant Beast section of the book. I thought it was like so good.
It's about love. I have more pages
Yeah.
marked on that than any of the rest of the book.
Yeah.
But like specifically, just one, like 3 sentences, is the gentle words, the feeling that this beast would be able to love her no matter what she said or did, lapped Meg in warmth and peace. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of that unconditional love. You just met this creature,
Yeah.
but you already have that sense of comfort and welcome and safety that she hasn't had for years at this point, since her dad left. And now they just left her little brother, the one she's supposed to protect.
Yeah.
So
And that's how
leaving
she
that
was
section out.
able to save her brother.
Right.
Yeah,
Now
in the book.
in the book, the beast, ant beast, and all the creatures on Ixchel have multiple limbs. They have no eyes. They don't see. They're blind. But it's not until they're up close that they realize that they're furry. And so, like in my mind, in the book, this is like soft fur, like a I don't know, like a mink or a seal, that like short fur. But I
Mhm.
swear in this movie, this was like shag rug Wookiee fur, like
In
really
the
long.
2003 movie.
Well, in the 2018 movie, we don't even see them, so it
Yeah,
doesn't
they're
You
matter.
matter.
see him for 1 second,
For
and
one
Zach
Oh,
second,
yeah, yeah,
Galifianakis, the
yeah.
a
happy
happy
medium.
medium. Yeah, he
Yeah.
says,
"Oh,
"Oh,
look,
there's
it's
Aunt
on."
Beast."
Yeah.
Like, and when I saw that, I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" Because I knew right then we weren't going to see them again, or else they wouldn't
Yep.
have. And I was just mad, and I'm still mad about it.
Aunt Beast,
So
no.
they hang around on Ixchel, where Mr. Murray manages to tesser them too. He was trying to keep them on Camazotz, on the same planet, but he's not really good at tessering, and of course he's weak because he's been imprisoned this whole time. But he manages to get him and Meg and Calvin away to Ixchel, where Aunt Beast and the other creatures heal them as best as they can, and they sit with them trying to figure out what the next steps are. These creatures are not going to let Charles Wallace get left behind. They don't like Camazotz either. They're one of their nearest planets in their system. They can't go there. They don't have the ability to tesser, but they're trying to figure out how they can get Mr. Murray and Meg and Calvin back there to save Charles Wallace. When the misses show up, and they're all like, "Y'all just left him there." And like Calvin's like, "Well, I'm supposed to protect her." And Mrs. Witch is like, "Yeah, you're doing a shit job." Like
Yeah.
they kind of pointed out that like you guys only did half the job. Like you didn't do that great. But they kind of explain that like Calvin's not going to be able to go back. He's not going to be able to help here. Mr. Murray is already weak. Like there's no point in him going back. He almost lost himself to it already. So the only one who can go back is Meg. And Meg is the only one who's going to be able to even have a chance, right?
Mhm.
And so Meg goes back, and Mrs. Witch says to her, "I love you. You have my love." And then says to her, "You have something that it will never have." And Meg's like, "What?" And she's like, "You have to discover that for yourself." And of course, this book and the movie, but this book, at that point, Meg saves the day and everybody goes home. Like that fast. That fast. And
Yeah.
that's where, like, I totally understand where everybody's like, this ending just ended. It just ended. Like the
Yeah.
climax, like we got to the top of the climax, and then it was a drop off. Like
Yeah.
there was no anticlimax. There was no long resolution or explained, like nothing. It was just goes back to comatose to save Charles Wallace, and then saves him, and they all go home. I don't even we don't I don't
Literally.
right? Like
They all go home.
they all go home just moments before they left because of the time wrinkle. And Mrs. Murray comes running out to say, "Hey guys, come on back in the house." And she's all like, "Oh, my husband," whatever. The dog comes out, and the twins are there, and everybody's happy, and they all live happily ever
Yeah.
after for all we know.
Yeah.
The end.
Which they don't, because there's more books. But like, so,
Spoiler.
and that's the thing is like, in the context of the rest of the books, this ending makes sense because we still are fighting the darkness. It does not die. It is still there, right? We still have to fight it. They were just barely able to escape for a moment, but they're still in the fight, right? And that's where, like, in the 2018 movie, it is destroyed. They're like, "You get to go home and live happily ever after now. You've put up more fight than anybody else ever has. Thank you for your service. We love you. Goodbye." And
Mhm.
like I'm sitting here going like, no, 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 no. There's more books. There's more.
No, they're like,
like,
"Wrap it up, you're done."
it doesn't die. And so that's where like, yes, this book ends fast, but it ends, with the missus snatching them everybody out of there and getting them all home, right? And then we move right into like Mr. Murray's home. He still works for the government. He still has like now he's got this tesseract information, and he's seen other planets. He still has, so like we go back into the story. There's still so much more. And so it does kind of resolve and then move into the next one, but not until we get into The Wind in the Door. So,
Isn't it weird in the 2018 movie where whenever they find the dad, he's, like, just in this, like, weird box,
yeah.
like, in this, like, colored box or whatever, like, it's, like, multiple colors, and he's just, like, crouched there, like, just sitting there,
Yeah.
and he's
He's
been
just
gone
sitting
for
there.
years. I'm like, what is going on here?"
I
Like,
mean,
in
in
the
the book they don't really explain much either. Like he's in this dark, dark room he can't see at
Yeah.
all. But he's been like under constant psychic attack from the
Yeah, and
for
it's not
years.
really indicated in the movie. It kinda, like, looks like he's just was, like,
Just chilling.
obsessed. Like, well, he was obsessed with trying to figure out
Right.
how to test her, and then he, like, kinda accidentally did it.
Yep.
But in the book, I wasn't it where he was doing it for his job, right?
Right. The guy, and that's the other thing is like in the movie, they really do make him sound like he's a crackpot scientist. In
Yeah.
the movie, they're like, you know, he said he could travel the space with his mind.
Yeah.
Like, they like make him sound like he's some idiot.
Yeah.
But like in the book, we know he's working with the government. We know that
Yeah.
he's working on top secret sciencey stuff.
Mhm.
And so I feel like they discredit Mr. Murray in the movie a lot. Whereas in the book, we're led to believe that this is a smart, intelligent man. Nobody
Yeah.
in their community ever says, like, you know, Mr. Murray was so stupid. No, they say he was so smart, he probably left because these kids are holding him back. Like
Mhm.
everybody knew he was smart, and they respected that part of him.
Yeah.
So I think there were definitely a lot of differences between the book and the movie, but overall, how do you guys feel? Like, would you recommend the book? Would you recommend the movies
2018 movie, yes. 2003 movie, probably not.
and the
Maybe
book?
to traumatize you.
The book, yes.
Definitely. Carrie?
I would definitely recommend the 2018 movie. I'm not recommending that 2003 catastrophe. I would definitely recommend the book, honestly, even though I think it was like an average type book. I kind of wish that when I was younger, my parents like pushed me to read books like this when I was younger, or I
Mhm.
like picked these type of books up myself because I feel like I kind of missed out on something like this. So I definitely think that
Well, I'm glad you
younger
read it this
generation,
time.
yeah, they could benefit from this, I think. I think this is a
Absolutely.
really cool experience to read this one. I'm really happy I read it.
So for sure, I recommend the book to everyone, literally ever. Same with the movie. The 2018 movie was fun. I feel like it wasn't necessarily as true to the book, but it was definitely a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
The 2003 movie was more true to the book, but horrific to watch. So maybe don't.
Horrifying.
Or at least don't let your children watch it, because
Yeah.
that's the stuff of
I
nightmares.
thought the acting was pretty good, honestly. The
For
acting,
child actors, I think Charles Wallace
So good.
was
Perfect.
so
yeah.
good in the 2003 movie. Like for a
Yeah.
child actor to pull off that kind of crazy, excellent.
Uh-huh.
Excellent.
Okay, so Calvin in the 2018 movie?
Are you about to tell us he's cute? Like,
No! Oh my
I
god,
was
it's a
gonna say,
child.
well, not that kind of cute. Ooh, speaking of though, the 2003 movie, Calvin in the 2003 movie, and I can't remember the actor's name, but he is just a couple of years younger than me, I think, in real life. And he is doing like all kinds of stuff now. And he's a very, very handsome man, but he was cast in all of those teen movies right around
Oh,
that
yeah,
same
you
time
could
of that
tell.
like
You could
the early
tell.
2000s. Yeah. In fact, I think he was in one of the like Disney Halloween movies. I can't remember.
No,
Anyways,
what I was trying to say is that Calvin in the 2018 movie, I felt like he was trying to do too much.
oh yeah.
Like, he was trying to this was supposed to be his, like, breakout role, and he was trying to, like,
Yeah.
be, like, the heartthrob of
Yeah.
little
You're
teeny
12,
bopper
kid. Shut
Disney
up. Like,
movie. I was like, "What is he doing?" Like, it's the little smirking, like, little lips for me. Like, what is he doing? I was
he
like, "Get away from
definitely
Meg. Stop.
definitely
I'm
had some moments
scared."
where I was like, okay, that was a
I was
choice.
like,
Like,
"Okay, you do you, but stay away from my girl Meg."
so that leads to this episode's big question. If you could Tesser to any fictional place, where would you go? Since we already know what Carrie's going to say, let's start with Lindsay.
I picked my answer based on our host and also based on current events. I went with the Shire from Lord of the Rings.
Aww.
Ooh.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, yep, go for it.
I'm going I'm going straight to Valeris.
Yeah,
And if anyone doesn't know, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I'm going straight to Rita's.
yeah, honestly,
I'm
like,
hanging out with Cassian.
no,
I'm getting
shoot,
a
the 3 of
drink.
us go to Rita's, have
Yeah,
a
we're going
picture
to
of
Rita's.
margaritas,
Yeah,
like,
we're dancing all night long
all night long.
in
That'd be fun.
Valeris. It's gonna be great.
I didn't think hard enough about this question. I thought of a lot of places I would love to see. Definitely Valaris, definitely the Shire. I actually thought of Star Trek a lot, like, just rather than going to like a place, just go to a time, like San Francisco, Starfleet Academy, like, because I'm that kind of a nerd. So yeah, I think should tessering ever become a real thing, I'll have a list. I'll have a nice list.
Multiple places, just a whole round trip.
Pretty much. And just take a tour of
Yep.
all the fictional places in the world.
There you
Holodeck
go.
style. Well, guys, I think that wraps this one up. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to check out the conversations and exclusive bonus content on our TikTok, our Instagram, our Facebook page, and join us next week for the next chapter of Based on a Book. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.